intuition.
Super volcano blast would blanket the United States in ash. ScienceNews.org. And I'm going to share with you the levels in just a moment. Also, check this out. This took me a few minutes to find. I just had to know where to look. Archives from the defense.gov. And this is a specific meeting that was put together where they talked about actually, well, let me read this to you directly. Well, it points out the nature of the threat. It turned out to be a false threat under the circumstances. But as we have learned in the intelligence community, we have something called, and we have James Woolsey here to perhaps even address this question about phantom moles. The mere fear that there is a mole within an agency can set off a chain reaction and a hunt for that particular mole, which can paralyze the agency for weeks and months and years even. In a search, now, the same thing is true about just the false scare of a threat using some kind of a chemical weapon or a biological one. This is where it gets interesting. There are some reports, for example, that some countries have been trying to construct something like an Ebola virus, and that would be a very dangerous phenomenon, to say the least. Alvin Toffler has written about this in terms of some scientists in their laboratories trying to devise certain types of pathogens that would be ethnic specific so that they could just eliminate certain ethnic groups and races. And others are designing some sort of engineering, some sort of insects that can destroy specific crops. Others are engaging even in an eco-type terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there's plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our efforts, and that's why this is so important. So this is directly from the DoD. You can read about this, U.S. Department of Defense. This is the news transcript. It is the news briefing, Secretary of Defense William Cohen, April 28, 1997 at 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time. This is Cohen's keynote address to the Conference on Terrorism, Weapons of Mass Destruction, and U.S. Strategy at the Georgia Center, Mahler Auditorium, University of Georgia, Athens, Georgia. Wow. Now, this right here, will you just look at it? Doesn't this look interesting? Well, as of thickness, this is the millimeter measurements here. So if you're seeing the yellow, that's 1 to 3 millimeters. Orange, 3 to 10. Well, that's like a yellowish orange. Orange, 10 to 30. So that means you're going to be anywhere from a ½ inch almost to a little bit over an inch. Now, here's where it's interesting, because if you look at the central point around Casper, Billings, the belly of the beast right there, you're talking like 40, 50 inches worth of ash. And many predictions have even more than that. This is somewhat of a mellow version. I mean, the entire U.S. literally just gets blanketed in ash. Now, if ash mixes with rain, then it's going to get real ugly. Now, 2,300 tremors. This is at Newsweek or Yahoo. An ongoing earthquake swarm at Yellowstone volcano is now one of the biggest ever recorded, with over 23 tremors since it began in June. As of August 30th, 2,357 earthquakes have been recorded. The most powerful in recent weeks was the magnitude 3.3. It took place on August 21st. There was a 4.4, which was recorded on June 15th. Read all about it, Hannah Osborne, Newsweek, or Yahoo.com. I was going to say Yellowstone. Here is the volcanoes.usgs.gov you can look at. This is just the past month, the past 31 days. So 1,023 earthquakes in the region in 30 days. Now you times that by 12, you're over 12,000. Actually about 13,260 approximately. If you look at it over 90 days, they're at 2,300. Well, 1,023. Somebody called me a shill because I said the number 33, so I guess I am a shill because I said the number 33 earlier.
Monkey mind not compute more very well.
This is interesting. The volcanic ash of southern Chile and Argentina. You can see right there. We just look at it. Look at all that love. If you want to read more about this Space Preservation Act of 2001, this talks about some of these scholar weapons, etc. H.R. 2977. But wow, this is a crazy article right here. And you know what? Anybody that has done the research on bioweaponry, etc., done just a little bit of research, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. The fact that they're talking about it, I find fascinating. And rightfully so. I mean, shouldn't we be discussing this kind of stuff? Because what if they are manipulating the weather right now? What if, Russia, China, or even our own government? Because let's go back here to this H.R. 2977, this specific bill, the Space Preservation Act of 2001. This is essentially an international treaty not to use space weapons, satellites, etc. for warfare. But how easy would it be if you had the technology to cause serious havoc without having to send any troops over, without having to have any ICBMs, any F-35s or jets or airplanes or helicopters, none of that. You'd have to have the equipment, the know-how, and the energy to produce, and you'd have to be able to specifically target those areas like Yellowstone, as an example. So let's go back to the Yellowstone discussion for a minute. 2,300 tremors over the past 90 days, over 1,000 over the past 30 days, 1,023 over the 31 days, past month. Some years, that's the amount of earthquakes Yellowstone gets in a year. Is the next war that we see, or that we're a part of, hopefully not, but could the next war actually, they throw all the treaties out the window, and they're kind of beta testing right now just to see what happens. See how far they can push it. But what's going on in Russia? What's going on in China? What's going on in North Korea? What's going on in Iran? Do they have these technologies? Russia, I would absolutely say, has these technologies. China probably has these technologies. Iran, possibly. North Korea, I doubt it. I mean, they've got the fourth largest military. They have the fourth largest military. Let me read some statistics from defense.gov about North Korea. Where is this at here? We hope we will have access to the defection or the defector. In fact, I was recently in South Korea and talked with various officials in South Korea. As they complete their own interrogation of this defector. Let's get to the good stuff. North Korea poses a very serious threat against South Korea, and potentially even Japan, by virtue of having the fourth largest army in the world, by having 600,000 or more troops within 100 kilometers of Seoul, of possessing many Scud missiles, also the potential of chemically armed warheads, the attempt to acquire nuclear weapons, so we know they have this potential. And the question really is going to be what's in their hearts and minds at this point. Now, this was in 97. So 20 years to advance their weaponry. How far have they taken it? What do we not know? Question everything. Also, if you're looking for some really good supplements to help keep your immune system boosted, to help with your digestive system, to help with all sorts of opportunities, check out getthetea.com. If you go on there and look at the colostrum, that stuff is amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And if you're looking for something that's kind of like a supplement to coffee or something you drink, caffeine drinks, check out Formula 13. This stuff is amazing, and it's also good for clarity of mind. At least it is for me. So getthetea.com. When you purchase the product, when you check out, they'll ask how you heard about them. Make sure you let them know it was a Leak Project. And that's my shameless
society. And with this in mind, we can say that we are much stronger than any potential aggressor.
Russian relationship also figures to be much different. The president-elect and Russian President Vladimir Putin have alternated between complimenting each other and threatening an arms race. Barry Peterson has that part of the story.
Parading their military might through Red Square is an annual ritual for the Russians, and so is talking tough. And that's exactly how Russian President Vladimir Putin sounded today at his annual press conference. The Russian Federation is stronger than any potential aggressor, he claimed. Putin's saber rattling echoes the worst of the Cold War standoff and comes just days after he threatened to expand Russia's nuclear capabilities, prompting what appeared to be similar comments from President-elect Donald Trump. Some fear Mr. Trump and Putin's comments could trigger a new arms race after years of treaties that reduced nuclear arsenals. Nerves are already on edge. These NATO exercises in Poland were the biggest in decades, prompting the Russians to stage their own counter-maneuvers as a show of force. Russia now says it will expand nuclear missile patrols next year on its borders with Europe. Today, Mr. Trump doubled down on his earlier comments, telling Morning Joe co-host Mika Brzezinski, "Let it be an arms race, because we will outmatch them at every pass and outlast them all." And while Putin had one hand in a clenched fist today, the other offered an olive branch in the form of a Christmas letter to the president-elect, saying he hopes the two men can act in a constructive and pragmatic manner. The two leaders seem to be jockeying with each other to define a new relationship between the U.S. and Russia, Elaine, with the danger of nuclear conflict if they get it wrong.
The RS-28 Sarmat, dubbed Satan II by NATO, has been widely reported to have a top speed of 7 kilometers a second and an expected range of nearly 10,000 kilometers. This would allow Moscow to attack European cities as well as reaching cities on America's west and east coasts. And it's also reported the missile could destroy an area the size of France or Texas. The Sarmat has been designed to outfox anti-missile shield systems. According to the Daily Mail, the Russian Defense Ministry plans to put the Sarmat into service in late 2018 and remove the last SS-18 missile by 2020.
This footage, broadcast by Russian state TV and other channels in early October, shows Russians taking part in 4-day-long emergency and civil defense drills across the country. Some 40 million people ultimately participated in what was the biggest test run of its kind since the fall of the USSR.
А вот куда бежать в случае бомбежки, половина не знает.
The drills were designed to train people how to survive in the event of a nuclear attack or other disasters.
Обязанность любого государства – обеспечение безопасности населения, защита граждан.
The Emergencies Ministry said it was preparing bomb shelters throughout Moscow that would accommodate the entire population of the capital.
Осматривают все подземные помещения, они подойдут, чтобы переждать налеты.
Videos of emergency workers in gas masks and preparatory tests for bomb shelters were prominently aired, and commentators on state TV could be heard making anti-American statements.
России надоело высокомерное американское вранье. Уже известного достаточно, чтобы почувствовать новую атмосферу ожесточенности.
Observers say the Kremlin's underlying goal of this kind of saber rattling is to reinforce Russia's stature as a nuclear superpower on par with the U.S. and to distract from an economic recession.
But Secretary Kerry's trying to get a stand down of the Syrian and Russian Air Force, and if he's successful, that would be a good thing. And ask the chairman if he has anything to add.
Senator, the only thing I'd say is, as the situation on the ground changes, I think I have a responsibility, we, the Joint Force, has a responsibility to make sure the President has a full range of options. We have discussed that issue in the past under certain conditions. The conditions on the ground will change, and we'll continue to look at those options and make sure they're available to the President.
What about the option of controlling the airspace so that barrel bombs cannot be dropped?
All the options.
What do you think of that option, sir?
Right now, Senator, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war against Syria and Russia. That's a pretty fundamental decision that certainly I'm not going to make.
I want to be clear to those who wish to do us harm. I want to be clear to those around the world who want to destroy our way of life and that of our allies and friends. The United States military, despite all our challenges, despite our op-tempo, despite everything we've been doing, will stop you and we will beat you harder than you've ever been beaten before. Make no mistake about that.
In the 1950s, the U.S. detonated more than 100 nuclear devices at the Yucca Flats test site in Nevada, 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The tests resulted in dramatic increases in leukemia, lymphoma, thyroid cancer, breast cancer, melanoma, bone cancer, brain tumors, and gastrointestinal tract cancers. By the 1960s, there wasn't anywhere on Earth where the signature of nuclear bomb radiation wasn't present. According to the National Cancer Institute, nuclear tests in the 1950s and 1960s exposed 160 million Americans to iodine-131 fallout. A study by the Institute concluded 70% of thyroid cancers are attributed to the tests. According to a press release by the National Nuclear Safety Administration, earlier this month, 2 Air Force B-2 bombers dropped fake nukes in the Nevada desert. The bombs were dummy variants of the B-61, a nuclear bomb that's been in the U.S. arsenal since the 1960s. Brigadier General Michael Lutton said the B-61 is a critical element of the U.S. nuclear triad. The Sandia and Los Alamos National Laboratories worked together on the B-61 assemblies manufactured at the Kansas City National Security Campus and assembled at the Pantex plant in Amarillo, Texas. Russia voiced concerns about the nuke upgrade. The Russian Foreign Ministry believes the B-61 modifications make it more likely the U.S. will use nuclear weapons during a future conflict. In response to the provocative test, Russia announced a suspension of cooperation with the U.S. in the nuclear and energy sectors. Russia's deputy foreign minister told RT Russia is planning to modernize its nuclear weapons stockpile. In response to the provocative test, Russia announced a suspension of cooperation with the U.S. in the nuclear and energy sectors. The Russian deputy foreign minister told RT Russia is planning to modernize its nuclear weapons stockpile. On October 3rd, Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country has decided to withdraw from a landmark nuclear security agreement. Putin said the move was a response to the deterioration of relations between Moscow and Washington and what he called a radically changed environment. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Russia, accusing it of interfering in Ukraine, most notably in Crimea. In March 2014, the people of Crimea voted to join the Russian Federation after a U.S. State Department-sponsored coup overthrew the government of Ukraine. The post-coup government is fiercely nationalistic and neo-fascist and continues to wage war against ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine. Russia also opposes a U.S. and NATO missile defense system on its border with Poland. The United States insists the system is directed against Iran. Russia argues it's an attempt to destroy the strategic balance in Europe. In June, NATO launched its largest war game in Europe since the end of the Cold War. Russia responded with a large military exercise of its own in August and another in September on land and in the Black and Caspian Seas. NATO said during its Warsaw summit in July it plans to deploy 4 multinational battalions along the eastern flank, one each in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. The Pentagon says it'll spend $789 million in 2016 and to send a message to the Russians the U.S. is prepared to start a nuclear war in Europe. If this seems unimaginable, keep in mind the United States is the only country in the world to have ever used nuclear weapons. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 killed more than 250,000 civilians. Historians claim the attacks forced the Japanese to surrender and subsequently saved the lives of 1 million American soldiers prepared to invade the Japanese mainland. In fact, the Japanese were negotiating surrender when the bombs were dropped. The attack had little to do with ending the war. Many historians now agree the real reason for the attack was to demonstrate a new weapon of mass destruction to the Soviet Union and kickstart the Cold War. The United States is attempting to launch a new Cold War and a renewed round of obscene military spending that will rake in trillions of dollars for the military-industrial complex and the financial elite. Instead of profit, the result very well may be the end of life on planet Earth.
As President-elect Donald Trump puts it, until the world, quote, comes to its senses, the idea of nuclear expansion is on the table. In a statement on Twitter, Trump said on Thursday, the United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. The remarks seem to echo what Russian President Vladimir Putin, whose government has indicated it's willing to work with the incoming Trump administration, said earlier in the day.
We need to strengthen the military potential of strategic nuclear forces, especially with missile complexes that can reliably penetrate any existing and prospective missile defense systems.
It's not the first time Trump has focused on the issue of nuclear weapons this year. During the presidential debates, he said it was a far more important issue than global warming.
We are not keeping up with other countries. I would like everybody to end it, just get rid of it, but I would certainly not do first strike. I think that once the nuclear alternative happens, it's over. At the same time, we have to be prepared. I can't take anything off the table.
If the president gave the order, we had to launch the missiles.
Trump's position on nuclear weapons and temperament was the focus of attacks by his political rival Hillary Clinton this past year, in ads and speeches questioning his credibility.
Imagine him in the Oval Office facing a real crisis. A man you can bait with a tweet is not a man we can trust with nuclear weapons.
Now that Trump has won the election, that point is basically moot. The current Obama administration says it doesn't share Trump's view and points to its efforts to reduce nuclear stockpiles, including the New START treaty signed with Russia and the international agreement with Iran to stop its nuclear program. But even some critics of Trump's statement say talk of nuclear expansion is not new.
But even under the Obama administration, there were plans put forward to essentially completely rebuild the U.S. nuclear arsenal over the next 30 years at a cost of about $1 trillion. And that was something that the Obama administration agreed to get the New START arms control treaty ratified a few years ago.
The Twitter statement may simply have been political posturing after Putin's statement, or could foreshadow new U.S. policy after Trump is sworn in as president next month. For now, it's brought the issue of nuclear weapons back into the spotlight.
If you ask me if I believe in Jesus, the answer is yes. And if you ask me why, well...
It is the Holy Bible. It is the truth. You've read it 1,000 times and you've skipped over it, but look at it. I'm going to ask you again. Are you really ready for the coming of the Lord?
Hey Elijah, how's it going?
I don't want to be here. This is just DQ. My mom forced me to come here.
I know, my mom did too.
It's whatever, though. Hold him now.
I really don't want to be here. My mom is forcing me to come. She's just a waste of my time. I could be doing better things than this. I'm not a teacher. It's going to be so nice.
Everyone stand as we pray to the Lord. Heavenly Father, we invite your presence in the sanctuary, Lord God. We invite your presence into our hearts and our minds. Transform us, Heavenly Father. Speak to us. Help us to become something better. Help us to become like Jesus, your Son. We thank you, Lord Father God, for your Son, Jesus Christ, and for the sacrifice of his name. Anoint this message in Jesus' name. You may be seated. In the book of Joel, chapter 2, the Lord tells us to blow the trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming, for it is at hand. And what God's asking us is to sound an alarm in our own hearts and minds, because we better be ready. We better know that our names are written in the book of life, because we don't want to miss it. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16, the Lord says that he himself will descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first, and we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we shall always remain with the Lord. We shall be with the Lord. And when we are with them, there'll be no more crying. There'll be no more sorrows, no more grieving. You won't have any more worries, because there'll be no more sickness. And he tells us, he says, therefore, comfort one another with these words.
Shut up! Just shut up! I can't stand you right now. My dad's at home sick, and your so-called God says there's no sickness. Look at him. Shut up! Sit down, Jesus freak.
You can't run away from judgment. You gotta take the judgment. Hey, face to face with your maker. You can't parlay God.
Since we've been talking about the rapture, this whole week it's been heavy on my heart. It's been heavy on my heart that people aren't going to make it. It's been heavy on my heart that people aren't going to take Jesus seriously. That he's given us so much to cling to, so much to rely on, so much to have faith in. But when we don't believe, we just might not make it. So we got to ask ourselves, are we ready?